Well, hello, and welcome to the Ultimate API Challenge. Yeah, you read it right. It's another Weather App API Challenge, and the reason for that is that the API that we used to use before is down. It's not working anymore. So I see how many of you do still want to make a weather app and put it on your portfolio and play around with an API that can give you this data. So I asked you in the community tab in the poll on YouTube thingy if you want to just have an extension of it or have a full-blown new challenge with TypeScript, and you said yes. So that's why we have gathered here today. If you're coming from previous API challenges for the Weather App API, then please check the chapters that I'm going to leave here below. And if you just want to skip to the way how we work with the API in order to use it in your previous project, then please feel free to do so. If not, then without further ado, let me show you what we're going to be building today and a quick check about the tech stack that we're going to be using. It's TypeScript, TailwindCSS, ReactJS. So yeah, we're going to be using TypeScript and ReactJS together. We're going to be using Fetch, so nothing like too fancy. We're not using Axios today. And we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be very beginner friendly. I'm going to keep it like on the very getting to know TypeScript kind of part. And we're going to grow together, be challenged together and see where it brings us. So without further ado, let's go. If you're familiar with the previous Weather App API challenges that we've had, they all kind of look similarly. We have first an input field with a search button, and then once the user clicks on it, then we kind of like hide and show. If we get a forecast, then we of course show the forecast, and that's it basically. This time though, I have extended it with a tiny feature. So if we go here and we type London, let's say we want to have London, we get a drop down of possible searches or possible locations that the user is searching for, and this we're going to be implementing. So we are going to have two API calls. I think we had that also. Yeah, we definitely had that in the previous API challenge as well. And this is no different in terms of the amount of API calls we're making, but the type of it is different a little bit. So once the user clicks on what they have selected and you click on search, then we see our little result, and this is everything what we're getting from the API. And we're gonna show the forecast for the next 24 hours or so, or maybe like 2 days, and some statistics here. Then we're gonna convert some numbers. Don't worry about the conversion. Sometimes it's a little bit too heavy. I don't know anything about weather stats. I had to Google everything, so I left some helper functions, but on that later. And if the user wants to search again, then they just need to refresh and they are going to get the initial state. In order to start, as usual, or if you're here for the first time, I always have a GitHub repository. For now it's private, but it's gonna be public once this challenge is live. Every GitHub repository for an API challenge has a finished result, a starter files, and some information. So you always have a README where you can read a little bit about what's gonna be in this challenge in case you're just, I don't know, finding that through GitHub. You have the tech stack and some information here, and of course you have also the preview. We also have the official docs of the API. So if you want to start, I would suggest you go here and you click on the copy in order to copy the repository, because we are going to start with some already prepared files, and I'll show you why. Okay, so once you are in your terminal, you need to navigate to any repository or to any folder that you want to have this repository. So let's say you have your CD projects, you go there, and wherever you are, you just need to do git clone and paste the repository link that we copied in the GitHub. So I'm not going to do that because I already have it. Let me navigate to mine. All right, so this is how mine looks like. It's a very long folder name, but the point is that we now need to cd to starter files. I was in the wrong repository, so in the wrong folder. So this is the actual folder. And now we need to do cd to starter files. And now I have an extension or not an extension, a command that I can run, and I just do code and a dot, and that will open my code in Visual Studio Code. If you don't have that, then you can just open regularly the code. So here are our starter files. You can see right here that we are in the starter files in case you are not sure where we are. Let me give you like a quick overview of what we have here and why in general did I want to start with already prepared starter files. So usually I would go to a package.json in order to understand what you have in a repository. It's all very boilerplatey. I ran some commands to create a React app and then added TypeScript into it, and as well added TailwindCSS. So as you can see, we have TailwindCSS and everything else is React and TypeScript. That's it. So everything else that we are going to build on top is just our magic hands doing magic code. So once we're out of the package.json, there is the README file that explains how to run things a bit. So in order to make things a little bit easier, every React application runs on a version of Node.js. Node.js is kind of like the engine underneath. And sometimes the versions of Node can be different and maybe the outcome can be a little bit different, like some packages might not work as expected. So there is a solution to that. Let me maybe show you this in GitHub, like in a more user-friendly, readable format. So here we have this repository is using ReactJS, TypeScript, and Tailwind, We're also running on Node 18, which you can see in .nvm-rc. If you go back to our repository, we have a file called nvm-rc, and this is our version, Node version, that we want to run. NVM stands for Node Version Management, or Node Version Manager, something like that. And in order to get NVM on your machine, you can run this command. You're gonna get it. Then you can run nvm-i and then nvm-use. So I already have nvm-i. I don't need to do that, but I can do nvm-use. Then it will do something and it will tell me that now it's using the Node version that is defined in my nvm-rc 18.7 in this repository. So you can go to another repository and run their nvm use, and it's going to be using a separate Node version. It's very helpful instead of like jumping from other Node versions. I actually wouldn't know how to jump from another Node version. That's why this one is super helpful. And many repositories or projects that you work in, if like it's somebody else's code, most likely they will have this file just in order to kind of like, you know, save people the hustle and the bugs that could be appearing from that. Be sure to have that, or just ensure that you have the correct version. And once you have the correct Node version, run npm install to get all the required dependencies. So we're gonna do that now because you see we don't have a Node modules. So once you have the Node version, the correct one, you can run npm install because that's gonna check the dependencies dependent on the Node version, or you get the point, right? Basically, you need to have the underlying correct Node version. Let's run npm install. While it's installing, we could actually go through the other parts of the repository. So I also added a basic git ignore here, which ignores things that should not be pushed to GitHub, as well as our env files. I'm gonna touch on that in a bit. I also added pretty RRC because what is coding without proper formatting, and you don't want to do that manually. Then we have also TailwindCSS, which is like the basic config that require this file, or they might even add this file for you, I don't remember. Yeah, so the env example, this API is using an API key. That's why this is a little bit something different and new than what we have done before. I don't think we have ever had an API challenge that has an API key yet. So this is the first. Why it's called .env.example is because, as you can see in our git ignore, we are not pushing to GitHub files that are just .env and might contain the values here. Because once it's in GitHub, it's like, this is a leak. You know, you don't need, you should not expose your API keys, though this API key will be still sent like in every request, so it doesn't really matter. But as a practice, let's start with good practices. So what I usually do do, what I usually do is I do this as save as, file, save as, and I do .env, so just remove the .example, save it, and they're gonna ask you, or maybe not, I don't know. And then you see now it's grayed out, and it's grayed out because git ignore is kicking in, and it says that it's not gonna, be pushing it to GitHub. So that's how kind of you can ensure that your file is ignored. Also, the node modules are grayed out because they are also not going to be pushed to GitHub. Looks like we have our package log and node modules, which means that our installation is done. So I showed you Tailwind, and then we also have our TypeScript config. This is again something like very boilerplatey. I use TypeScript. I use this config for TypeScript a couple of times now, and seems fine. So unless you want to really change something, then dig into that. But if not, just keep it as is, and we can go to our source file. Our application starts in index.tsx. So TypeScript files have the extension of .ts instead of JS, and JS6 files are now TSX files. So TypeScript React JS kind of extension. Here it's again very basic. We have our React things that React npm create React app gives us. We have an index CSS and an app. Our index CSS has nothing except for Tailwind. This was there, I just didn't remove it. Feel free to remove it if that bugs you. Then we can go to our app TSX. And this is kind of like the very beginning of our little app. What we see here is hello world, and let's see if we can run it. npm run. Let's check the readme. What does it say? npm run start. npm run start. And it might ask me to run it on another port because I have the prepared example on port 3000. You might not see that, so that's fine. Yours is just going to be open, but I would like to run the app on another port instead. Yes, mine is going to be run on 3001 probably. Yeah, so you see on 3000 I have this one, and on 3001 is going to be our app. I usually have issues with this thing. I started developing and I think that I have developed everything. Maybe if I pin it and it's small, then I will ignore it. Okay, so this is our app. Let's also open the inspector because we cannot do anything without the inspector. I'm gonna make it bigger so everybody can see everything. And we're gonna put it on the side. Perfect. Okay, so what do we have in our app? In our app, we have very basic main container that has flex, justify center, item center. So basically in order to make everything like centered, we also define the height and the width and the gradient. Very easy apparently to do gradients with TailwindCSS. That was very nice. And just hello world. So as a starter, we are going to build this kind of like frosted glass container and then build the elements on top of it. Let's also put these ones side to side. Maybe we can keep it at the bottom for now, right? In case we need the console, just in case it shouts at us and we don't see it. Okay, so our hello world is going to have a section in our main, and this section is going to have several class names in order to create the frosty look of the container. Well, maybe let's keep the hello world for now, just so we have a content inside of it. So the frosted look comes from background white, and then background opacity 20, and backdrop blur. Yeah. And then we also wanted to drop some shadow and make it slightly rounded. If none of this makes sense to you, that's absolutely fine because this is Tailwind CSS classes. So I just want to show you just a little bit how, those things are being changed together, but you absolutely don't have to memorize all these classes. I don't. I just go to the Tailwind CSS docs, and they are super helpful. You can just go there. There is a search bar, and you can Google. You can search for a background, and here you have background. I don't know. Let's go for size, and they already give you, that's the class and that's the property that it adds. So Whenever in doubt, always use TailwindCSS docs. They're really, really nice. In order to save us some time and not spend a lot of time on typing all these classes, I'm just gonna copy what I have from my done project. Let me give you a quick overview of what we have here. We have a width. W means width full, so it's like width 100%. And then we have also max width of 500 pixels, but it's prepended with MD. MD means that once our screen is of a medium breakpoint, and it's also defined what's a medium breakpoint, then the max width of our container should be 500 pixels and not more. So if it's lower, then it's width full. And you can see right now that our container is fully frosty. But if I make the screen bigger, then it's kind of like it shrunk and now it's only maximum 500 pixels. So this is kind of like how this works. You define first like the smaller thing, and then once the screen grows, you define the breakpoints that you want to see the change and which change you want to see. We have flex properties, text centers, item centers, just to make it a little bit look nice. And then again, playing with the height, playing with the paddings around it, the background white, opacity, background drop, what is this, LS? Then it's rounded, drop shadow, and the text is gonna be zinc 700. The 700 means the intensity of the color. So if I would put, for example, 200 and it's incremental by 100 or 600 or whatever, then it will change. But we're gonna change it to 700. And if you also want to have like this kind of things coming from the IntelliSense of Tailwind. Let me show you. Tailwind CSS, this one. Also, if you're wondering about the theme, then it's ice blue. That is crisp as an ice cube. I made it and there is already, wow, 1,500. That's sweet. Okay, back to our code. We have our hello world, and how about now we create our little weather forecast and the little prompt to enter below stuff. So for that, we're going to create an H1 and we're gonna have weather forecast. Under that, it's going to be a P tag where we're going to say what? Enter below a place you want to know the weather of, and select an option from the drop-down, right? Save it and let's go. So the thing about Tailwind CSS is that it resets all of your H1, P to very, very like basic text. They all look the same. And that's why we need to add additional classes in order for it to be also visually as H1 and so on. So the class name in this case is going to be for text for Excel. We're going to have a font thin, but we will wrap our forecast in a span inside of that H1. And we're going to add, let me close that. Probably that's better, right? And we're going to add a class name here of font black. And font black in Tailwind means like very, very thick font. They have also font medium, which you can see it's 500, then semi-bold is 600, bold is 700, extra bold 800, and black is 900. So I decided to go for 900, which is like the maximum thickness of the font, and I think that just looks nice, and it also looks a little bit like our previous API challenges of the weather app. So kind of like, you know, in our own way, a vintage, I guess. And now the P tag, I want to add a text small to make it a little bit cutesy. It's still readable, and a margin top of 2 just in order to push it a little bit aside. Okay, looks good to me. Now we need to add our input field and our button. So let's go. Input. So the type is going to be text. We will also need a value, which is to come. And we will need as well a class name, I will remove the value for now because, or just add something artificial because otherwise it's not gonna even compile. And the class name is going to have pixel2, py1, rounded, l, md, border 2, and border white. So what we have done here, first of all, you see that the value is k. If we remove that, it's gonna be empty. We gave some padding inside of the container to push the text a little bit, like to give it some space. And then we rounded it on the left side and we gave it a little bit of a border and a border white. I don't recommend playing with focus stuff unless you're overriding it in order to make it even better, because this is accessibility and this is very, very important. So if you think that your design is suffering because there is a blue little border around your input field, then I think you need to reconsider that opinion a little bit. Now we need to add the button, just so we have it. And I'm going to paste the classes that we have because it's a lot of classes, but I'm going to go through it. So while I'm talking, you can type it. Let me save it first. What's the issue? Yeah, our button doesn't have a text, so let's write search. We have a rounded right MD, so before that we had on the left side rounded and now we have on the right side rounded. I want them to be in one line eventually, as you can see here. And then we have again like our border, which is similar to the border that we have on the input field. So then, you know, they're kind of like aligned in their height as well. Then define the border, the hover state, so once you're hovering on it, that changes the color, the text, again, the padding, and also the cursor that it's like a little pointer. We have the elements, but now we need to make them all in one line. And in order to do that, we're going to wrap the div and the input, we're going to wrap the input field and the button in a div. And you see they're already all together very, very well. But we're also going to explicitly mention that it's a flex, because maybe like sometimes they're just gonna, you know, drop somewhere and you don't want to do that depending on the browsers. I checked that Mozilla was having a funny behavior, so that's why we're gonna explicitly define that it's a flex, a display flex. We're also gonna give it a margin top of 10. Maybe that's too much. Yeah. And the medium is gonna be margin top 4. Yeah, that's okay. So now if we click on this icon here, we can see how it looks like in iPhone SE. I think that looks pretty smooth. iPhone 12 Pro, also very nice. Yeah, very, very good. iPad Air, lovely. Pixel 5, nice. So you see it never goes like, oh, it has another color. Is that like the functionality of Pixel? I mean like the native colors. Anyway, something for me to learn. What is that? You provided a value prop. Yeah, that's fine. All right, so we have our search button, we have our input field, and now I think it's our time to dig into the API a little bit in order to see what is waiting for us. This is our OpenWeather API that we're going to be using. If we're going to go to their API, you can see a lot of things here, but bottom line, what you want is you want to go to, I think if you go to pricing and you go to the free one, you go to click get API key. You need to fill out this data. You're gonna say yes, 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 yes. And then let me sign into my account. Basically what you're gonna see is you're gonna be logged in and you're gonna have your API keys. This is my API key, and you can just copy that key. It's most likely going to be active. It might not be active if you have not confirmed your email address, so keep an eye on that. And you can always generate another one. Go to the end file that we copied, and where we have the React app API key, just paste your API key here without any quotes or anything, just paste it as you copied it. So since we want to go and read a little bit about the docs, and we go to API doc here, and this is all the data that we have about this API and how to work with it. So main thing, how to make an API call with this API is that we need our API key, as you can see here, And we need our lat and long in order to get the location and the information of the forecast for that specific place. And as you can see, it is a required parameter. The app ID is also required, which is the API key in their case, and exclude is optional, so, and all of those things. So it doesn't matter. But this is how our request is going to look like. So in order to get a latitude and longitude, we'll need to go back to our API overview, and we will need to find something called geocoding. I think it is. So we can use the direct geocoding that they have. It allows us to get a geographical coordinate, the lat and long, by using the name of the location, a city name or an area name, and that's what we want. This is actually what our app is going to be doing. So what I showed you, that if we're going to be putting London, then what it does, it makes like all these requests that we're passing the query that the user is inserting, and it gives us all the options that the API has. And once we click on them, then we are supposed to save the lat and long and use it for the request to fetch the forecast. So let's go back to our app TSX and let's make the input field work in a way that is going to give us some suggestions. Go to the top, and here we're going to just copy this API call URL that we have and just paste it, just in order to have it, right? Comment it so it's not giving you any errors. And we are going to create onChange event for the input field. We're going to listen to whenever the user is inserting a value. In order to do that, we need to have two things. First is going to be the value needs to be reactive. So whenever, the user is typing, it needs to be reflected. And for that, we need the state. So const, let's say term, because the user is searching for a term. Set term equals use state, and the default state is going to be an empty string. So now it's given us cannot find use state. We need to import it. Import use state from React. By the way, you might not see that we're importing React from React in those files, because with TypeScript, there is a feature there where you can just say hey, no need to import that thing all over again. And this enables you to not do that. We have our use state, and now let's create our onChange event. Const on input change. We're of course going to pass the event here, and let's just console log event.target.value. We are going to call this on input change in the input tag, and it's going to be on change. And you just pass on input change, and that should work. And as well as the value needs to be term. So our value initially is going to be an empty string, and then once we're going to type something, which we still didn't do, then we will use the set term in order to update our term, right? Just how React stuff work. And now if we go to our app, we see that our TypeScript is complaining because we have an implicitly any type. And this is a no-no for TypeScript, because what's the point of having a TypeScript if you are going to use any of all types? So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is basically straight away telling your code which value or which type of value you expect your variable to be, or an argument in the function be, and it has to be just the value that you say. It can be several values, it can be a specific value, it even can be a set value, like, I don't know, maybe you want to tell it that it can be just Monday or Tuesday. That can also be. So it actually is pretty fun. So yeah, let's define. So if we're going to start from the top to the bottom, we're going to first start with our const app, which is our component. And every React component, you need to define what you are returning, not just the React component. You give it an input and you're expecting an output. And in this component's scenario, we're not given any input. So it's just our first component, doesn't have any props, but we are expecting it to return a React component, and in this case it's jsx.element, and this is what most of the React components will look like, that you have this at the end. So the colon TypeScript syntax, which means that this is what we're going to be returning, and you're writing what you're going to be returning, and that happens before the arrow of the arrow function. If you would like to define the arguments like we're going to do here for the event, then you can do it directly inside of the argument. So because it's a TSX file, it will know what the syntax is. So once you have a colon, it means that, okay, now I'm going to be defining what I want. So I can define that it's going to be a string, but since I define that it's a string, later on this E, I'm accessing a dot target of a string, which doesn't make sense, right? So if I hover, it says property target does not exist on type string. So, okay, that already tells you that something is wrong there. And in case of an event, so like of a E thingy, there are actually prepared types from React that you can use in order to say, okay, this is the change event. Because if you actually console log what an event is, like, we're probably not gonna go through it right now, right? What if I just do like an object? So if we're gonna console log what an event, you see, is a synthetic based event, React, la la la, all of these things. You don't want to be typing that. Like, there is no value for you to be typing that this is what it's going to look like, because that's just a waste of time. However, React is giving us types, and if we check in the package JSON, we have like a package called types React or types node or types whatever, and this is where our types for things that we use in TypeScript for React specific things are going to come from. So in our case, it's going to be a change event, and we're going to define that this change event happens on HTML input element, because a change event can happen on different elements, and I guess you want to specify which type it is. And the change event, you're actually also importing from React, right? Element. Like that. Yeah, cool. So now if we go back to our console log with target value, it even offers us a lot of things. So it's really, really, really handy. So let's clear it up and write London. Cool. So right now we're getting just like the last input that we had, because right now we're just doing a console log. But what we want is to launder from each letter to become a word. So we need to do set term e.target.value. If we do London, then you see it's also being kept here. And if we console log term, then we'll see that that's London. No. Yeah. So this happens because the state is asynchronous, and this set term is taking a little bit longer than to console log. So don't worry about that. That's absolutely fine and correct. And now on our input change, we also want to somehow start working with our API. Since we have already defined here our type, why don't we also not forget to define here the type? So the thing with useState, you see, like, we have a little bit of a different syntax. Like, sometimes we have this colon and defining what it is. Sometimes we have the colon and this thing. It's all the same, but sometimes the syntax can look like this one way or another. I found that the state is easier to be defined. I don't know if that's the only way how to like make the use state understand which value I want to pass it, but this is the most common way I've seen it being done. So that's what we're going to be doing. So string, we're going to define that our use state for the term and the set term needs to be a string. So if, for example, I would put here 0, that you see that will already like underline it with an error, because it says argument of type number is not assignable to parameter of type string. So save it. So now let's try and fetch what we want. Let's copy this and put it in backticks so we can use, you see they already gave us like this curly brackets, and if you put a $sign before it, it becomes a lovely thingy. Okay, what do we have here? Let's break it down. This thing is our base URL. That's just like where the API is and also where the website is. You see openweathermap.org, okay. Then we have GEO 1.0, direct, and then we start with the query parameters, which is Q, probably stands for query, and it's going to ask us for a city name. This is basically going to be our term, and we're not going to pass any state code or country code. We're not interested in that. However, we are going to limit things. There are two ways to do that. You can remove this variable and just put it 5 if you want, or if you want to make it a flexible variable, then you can set it as a variable here outside. Let's just roll with 5 because we will always want to have 5, nothing changes here. And we will also need to use our API key. The way how in React you can use your API key is, first of all, copy the name of it, React App API key. It's prepended with React App because if I'm not mistaken, maybe things have changed, but last time I checked it, it was that if you're prepending it with React App, then React is going to kind of take it from the environmental file, so the .env one, and it's going to expose it to you as a developer, to your code in order to work with it. So if I'm not wrong, that's still the case. But you still need to write process.env and then .React App API key. Now, we might not have this key working yet because process.env is generated once or being read once on a start of your application. What we would need to do is we would need to quit our running server and to run it again. So now if we go back, it should be working. We need to go to our network tab. In here, we will be able to see all the API calls that are happening. So let's see. We got one API call, which eventually failed. Internal redirect. Okay, that's because probably didn't we include the term? Okay, so the same thing happened. Term is still asynchronous, so it wasn't really happening right now how it was going on. Like, we still didn't set the term. So what we're gonna do is we are going to create a const get search options. We are going to expect the term here, or let's say value, which will need to be a string. And this is where we're going to do our fetch. We're going to do it in another place. And because we still want to make a couple of checks before we're calling the API, and let's just change the term to the value. And let's also trim it here just in case, because you don't want to have London with like 5 spaces. I don't know if their API is like trimming it, but you also don't want to have it in your request. We also would like to see if our target of value is not empty, and only then call the get search options. If we're using it already here a couple of times, let's do const value equals e.target.value. Or we can actually do this from e.target. That would also be the same. And let's remove that. And we're gonna put it here. So that's kind of like what we did now. Let's just double check that it works, refresh it, and if you do blah, blah, blah. Okay, and all of these requests are happening now. But what we want to also check is that if value is empty, then return. Like, we're not gonna do any, because if I clean it up, you know, like if I do a space and then I clean, then I don't want it to fire any request. But why did a space fire it? That's not good. So we need to check. Let's bring it back. It's gonna be .value and it's gonna be .trim, and here it's gonna be value. So we're gonna trim it already. And this way, if you're making several spaces, I'm hitting the space bar, it's not going to trigger anything. However, if I type lon, and you see all of this is happening and we are getting our thing. Okay, so here is our request. We get our lat and long, very nice. Okay, let me maybe show you a better way to see those things. So we don't need to rely necessarily on our network tab. We can make it nicer. We can wait until the fetch is done, and then we can do a .then. And whenever we get our response, we're going to turn it to JSON. And then .then. The data, let's console.log data. And I do it in curly brackets just in order for us to see what is data actually is. Well, you'll see that. You see data, it shows me. So we got an array of 5 things because we actually ask for a limit of 5. If we would say 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, it's probably gonna give us all of that. Our very last one on lawn, it kind of suggests us these locations. And every location has a country, a latitude, a longitude, the name and a local name. What we're interested is the latitude and longitude. So in order to show the user that they have an option to select from, like here, if we do lawn, you see that's actually exactly the same thing that we got from the API, but we want to display to the user so the user can click on it, populate the input field, and then continue with the next request. Let's create a variable, const options, and set options equals use state. That's gonna be an array, and it's going to start with an empty array. Yeah. At this point, our data is going to be set options data. And now I want to read it out. Let's put it under the input. Let's put it under the button. Well, let's put it here. It's going to be options dot map option. And let's just say a P with option dot, what do we have here? An option dot name. Don't forget to add curly brackets again in order to show that it's JavaScript. Right, so property name does not exist on type, never. So now we'll need to extend that the option is an object and it has a key name and it has a string. Okay, now if we go to London, you see we have all these options. Now let's make it beautiful. Let's make it a list. We're gonna put it in an unordered list first. And you see, it's already cutie here. So we're just gonna position it absolute because I want it to kind of be hovering like here, you know, just to make it nice here. So how absolute works is that you need to make it relative to something, and I want to make it relative to this div because right now it's going relative to this div, and that's not what I want. I want it to be relative here. And now it jumped here. Very nice. Our absolute top 9, just in order, you can do it lower, you can do it higher, as you prefer. Instead of our option name and a p tag, we're going to create a button, right? Because we want the user to actually click on it, as well as if the user navigates with a tab, then if they navigate now with the tab, they absolutely have no way to select the p tags here because it's just a paragraph. It doesn't say to them that it's a selectable option. So we're going to do an li, and in each li we're going to have a button as well. So that's our structure. The li, however, needs to have a key. So we're going to construct this thing. It's going to consist of an option name plus a dash and an index. The index we will pass right now, and it's going to be a number. And the button will have a little bit of a different styling, which is gonna be this one. So it's text to the left, a smaller text, the width of it is gonna be full. If I save it, you're probably gonna see nothing great because the button doesn't have anything inside of it. It needs to have the option.name. Let's go with that, option.name. Yeah, and now also if I hover or anything, it's gonna be clicked. Well, we still didn't add a click event to that, but you see it has like a cursor pointer and there is more things visually. And also if, you know, you can do this. So if you click, yeah. All right, so let's add on our button. We're gonna have an on click. We want to send the lat and lon that the option has. We're not just interested in the name, right? Because the user sees only the name, but we're interested in what that option has actually. So what we're gonna do is that on this click, we're going to call a function like on option select, and we're going to pass the whole option. We're going to create an const on option select, and this is going to be option, and then we're gonna do something. Now, before we do something, there you go. You see that our option is again like erroring because of TypeScript. And we already know that we've defined a couple of times this option. So we define it here, and then we need to define it here, and we'll probably need to define it somewhere else. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to create a separate type for an option, and we're going to add like everything that we are expecting to use from that option. So if we're ever going to do option.lon or option.lat, then that needs to be reflected in the TypeScript type that we're going to define. And also TypeScript will know that, okay, this is expected to be in that object. For that, I would suggest to go to the folder that we have types and just create an index.ts. And in here, we're going to create type option type. I like to append it with the word type, because if you're exporting it, then you cannot just like write option, because that variable is already taken. So the way how you define types is, you know how we did it in our app? We did this, where was that? We did colon name string. So essentially option colon is the same as type option equals, and then we have the object. So our object is going to be the same. It's going to be name string. So let's type that. Name string. And why it doesn't like it? Cannot be compiled because it's considered a global script file other than import export. Yeah. So we are going to export the type, and we are going to import it on the top here. Import option type. It already offers me from types. And now we can just use that in here. Just going to put option type. And then in here, we're also going to put option, and the types of it are or can be found in option type. And that, I think, is one of the values of TypeScript. Not for you to be typing in every function that you're using this. Well, not the only value of TypeScript, right? But one of the values is not to repeat and just type all the types every time, but have a specific type, like one place where you define that type, and then use it wherever you're using that prop or that argument, because then you can double check yourself that everything is working as expected and all the properties are being passed. Because otherwise you can always just like, well, option is going to be a number today, and you're just like, what? Why? I like this part of TypeScript. Makes sense. Go to network because I want to see what else we get there. So we got the name, we got the latitude and the longitude. That's what we're interested in. So let's extend it with lat, which is a number, and lon, which is also a number. So now, where were we? We were on option select. We were sending it to here, and now we want to, let's console log option.name, just to see that we are doing what we are expecting us to do. Okay, we got London, then city of London, and nice. Okay, let's go back to our API, and where was it? We had the API, and it was this one call API. The API call example was here. So let's copy that. And we will want to call the API, right? So let's do fetch again backticks. Let's put up here everything. API key, again, the same drill. We don't need to quit our server again because we have already used it once, and when we ran the server, it was already defined, so that's already good. When it comes to exclude, there is nothing I want to exclude. Keep everything. We want to see everything. One call latitude is going to be option.lat, and here option.long. You see, it doesn't give us any errors because it already knows that yes, option will have those parameters. So there is not going to be any error here. Then they're also going to send it in funny metrics. So let's add units equals metric. Unless you're on the other side of the world or in England, then please use which other things that make sense to you. Okay, let's do again a .then response.json, and then .then, and then data, and then let's select the data. Oh no, why it doesn't like it? Oh, forgot one. And here, what's the problem? Because we didn't close it. There you go. Okay. Do we have everything I wanted to cover? I think so. Well, let's see. So once I click on London, I get a 401 unauthorized. However, I do get the data. Well, no. Please note that using one call requires separate subscription. We're not using the right API. Oh no, wait a second. I misled you. Let's go back to pricing. And the free one is the current weather. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, it's kind of the same. We just need to change this part because then we pass the latitude, the longitude, and the app ID. And the units, yeah, the units are still. So we just need to change up to here with the question mark. Save it and click now. There we go. Now it works. Okay, so it was just the wrong API. Nice. Look at that. We have all of this information. Okay, now what I want to happen once we click on those things and click search is that I want this also like to kind of reflect that we clicked on those things, right? So how are we going to achieve that? So we have a term and options. The term is just what the user is inputting. However, we also have the option, which is, let's call it the city or the location. Let's call it a city. And the city is the one that has the information of the option. So it has the long, the lat, the name, and that's what we're passing to the API. So what we want to do is that once the user has typed the term, because this is the term, this is stored in the variable term, options are being shown. And once there is a click on an option, we want to set a new variable called city because we want to store this option somewhere. And then we also want to clear up the options. Let's create here const city set city equals use state. And city is going to be again our option type. But in the very beginning, so you can actually define that it's or an option type or a null. Because if I would put here false, that would not work. But if I put null, then it knows that, okay, it's going to be null or the option type. So once we have something. Okay, so once we have our option, we want to set the city. Set city with the option, right? Because we want to store that information. Save. And then we want to listen that once the city was set, we want to remove the options, so like to clear the UI, and to also reflect it in our input field. And why we're creating like a separate city and term, because the term is just there for the input field to be, you know, like communication, like on change and whatever is happening. But the city is actually the information that we're given to work with the API. So it kind of like makes it easier, because otherwise you would have to make a lot of checks and it's different values and everything. So I'm not sure if it's worth it. That's why I think just keeping like two separate variables makes more sense to me, but I might be wrong. I don't know. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think about that. We set the city and now we want to listen. So we're going to create a use effect that is going to listen to the city. Pass it in the array of dependencies. So if we have city, because only if we have city, because city can also be null, then we don't want to do anything if the city is null, which will happen on load, or maybe somebody clears it up. But anyway, once we have the city, we want to set the term to be city.name and set the options to be an empty array, because we kind of like resetting, not really resetting the UI, but kind of like showing like, okay, you have selected this one, so options are gone. So now if we refresh and we type London and we click on London, yeah, so you see like our options have been gone, and it also kind of like added capitalized letter, uppercase, the first one, because that's what the data that is coming from the API looks like. Once we click on search, we would like to get the information of the forecast. What we actually did with on option select, the fetch, that's not the right location for the fetch. So we will just be setting the city on option select, and the fetch is gonna happen once you click on the button. So const on submit, we are going to check if no city, then return, else we are going to call get forecast, and we're gonna pass the city. And here we're gonna do const get forecast is going to expect the city, but we all know that it's an option type under the hood, right? And we are going to move the fetch that we have here under, you can just cut it out and put it here. Yeah, so the option is not there. Let's call it city, or you can just keep it option, but just rename the argument. So we have a city here, and the on submit is gonna go to our button. And in here, we're going to have an on click on submit. So once we have that, if we click it, only then we will get all the information we have. Nice. Okay, now that we have everything, we are at the point where we have a forecast. So we want to hide our search functionality and we want to show instead our forecast. We need to do a little bit of a refactoring. I suggest to put everything that we have done thus far into a component called search. We're gonna keep the functionality, like the JavaScript part here, but let's first split it into another component. What I like to do is to do, again, a save as, and I want to save this file. I want to put it in components and I want to call it search. Just go ahead and save it. It's gonna give us some errors, that's okay. So what we want to keep, so first of all, it's gonna be search. It's not going to have any of those things. So we said that JavaScript is gonna be staying at the parent. None of this is there. So you can remove it. And it's absolutely fine to remove it because your app TSX still has everything, so that's fine. Then you see we have the term, we have an input change, we have the options, the button. We still need those, but they're going to be coming to us as props. So let's define what do we need. So all of this can be gone. We need a term. We need options. We need on input change. What else do we need? On option select. And then we also need an on submit. So now we would need to define the types for it. So let's do type props. If it's like just limited to the component props, I like to just define it as props. It's just going to stay in that component, at least in our case. So term is going to be what we said. What was our term here? It's a string. Then we have options, which were an array, and we have on input change. And on input change is a function. We're gonna say that that function, we were defining it. If you check in our app, there we go. We had that function that is going to be passed to us. It's going to have an argument with change event HTML input element. And this is what we also need to define here in our search, that's what's gonna be happening, right? We want wherever we put this function in our code, in our HTML of the React part, we want it to ensure that there is an event being sent. So we need to define that. Then we can also say that it's a void, because the input change, we're not expecting it to bring anything back directly whenever this function is called to the element, for example. Again, we need to import change event from React. Then we have on option select, and that one is going to take the option, and we're going to have the option type. See, now we have it in two different components, and that's actually super helpful that we have extracted it. So we can do import option type from, go up to types, save it. Oh wait, we're not done. And this one is again a void. And on submit, we didn't define anything for the on submit, so it's just gonna be an empty function that is just triggering a chain of events, but is nothing to do with the props or anything. The same way as here we define :JSX element, here we are also going to define that the props are the types for all of our arguments. Okay, now it's a silly mistake because of the copy pasting. Export default search. Now we can actually remove this whole section. So let's collapse it and just remove it. And we can put our search, which was already imported by Visual Studio Code. So our search is missing some things. You see, type is missing from the following properties. So we can click on that and add missing attributes. Sometimes it's funky because if it's just like term and options, then it's nice. But you see, when it gives you like this autocomplete of on input change, it gives you all of these things and you need to remove that. I don't necessarily like it. So we're gonna just do it ourselves. Term is term. Options are options. Then on input change is on input change. On option select, on option select, and on submit is on submit. There we go. Once this is happening, how can we show that something else should be shown? We will need another state variable for that. That would be for our forecast. So instead of console login, I say we need to set forecast, which we still didn't create. We're going to create it in a sec, and define it to data. So it's underlining it because we don't have that, rightly so. Forecast and set forecast. Use state. And that one is going to be forecast type, which we are about to define, or null. So in the beginning, it's gonna be null. Now we need the forecast type. It's gonna give us some errors. So let's maybe just keep it as a null for now. We are going to check if we have our forecast. So forecast. Then let's render one thing, else render us the search. So if it's forecast, we have a forecast. Let's save that, refresh, and let's do a alt search. We have a forecast. Nice. Alrighty. Now, one more thing, in order to refactor a little bit better, what I do like to do is to put all of this in a separate hook, because I like to keep my JavaScript a little bit like the very basic JavaScript can stay in a component, but whenever it's like more complicated things that we actually need to like call an API and do like different states, then I like just for, I don't know, housekeeping reasons as well, just to keep it in a hook. So we can create one called use forecast.ts, and we are going to drop everything that we have there. So everything JavaScript, everything, don't be shy. Cut it out and put it in here. Well, no, first you need to do const use forecast, and now drop it. All right, so we're missing use states, use effects. Let's do that. use effect. We also need to import our types, option type, change events. Yep. And let's export default use forecast. Very well. Now, the way how hooks work is that if we want to use all of these beautiful things that we have already built, we just need to return things from them. They're just really like a simple function, but with some extra functionality to it. So what we need is the term, the options, and the forecast. Term, options, forecast, as well as some, why do I always write options, as well as some of the event handlers. So on input change, on option select, and on submit. Right, looks like that's all. And now in here we can use that. So let's remove everything we're not using. Save it. It's gonna give us some errors, that's fine. So now const, and in order not to type it again, let's go to our use forecast and copy this object, because that's what it's gonna be returning us, equals use forecast and call the hook. Et voila! Amazing, right? And it's so clean to read, especially if you have smaller screens and everything is like super, I don't know, the scale of the font is very high. I don't know. I like having overviews of like my file, and if the file is too long or too like cluttery, it's really annoying. Click on London, search, we have a forecast. Awesome, everything is working. All right, so did we do everything well here? Probably improve our namings, but I'll leave that to you. If you want, you can pick into the finished result and see how I name things there, but that's most of the time a personal preference, so you don't have to do that. Let's build our forecast, shall we? I think we should go to our network tab and we should see what we get. Let's just expand this one for now. Here is our last call. What we are going to be using, if we're going to check our current weather app, the one that I built, from the finished result, we have information that is like the location, the degrees, the state of it, the highest, the lowest, prognosis, right? Forecast, then sunrise, sunset, wind, feels like, humidity, precipitation, pressure, and visibility. So if we go here, we have a little bit more of information that we don't necessarily need. Since we're not going to be using everything of that, and we are also required to define in our use forecast, we need to tell what our forecast is, because for now it's null, but we actually had here forecast type, remember? We need to define this forecast type. So let's do that. Let's import it. We still don't have it. We go to types. I didn't save that file because it's gonna error and I don't want to see errors yet. Export type, forecast type equals, and open it up. So what we already know that it's going to have a name, which is a string. Then we also have here, have the name. Usually you also have the country. Let's refresh and let's go with London. There we go, search. Does it have country? Doesn't have country. Ah, here's the country, sorry. So we are going to use the country as well. Country is going to be a string, and then we're interested in the forecast itself. Okay, so I was actually wrong. We need to call the forecast, not the weather, because it just doesn't work this way. I was trying to find the information that I needed, but it was not there. So London, search, forecast. There we go. So that's the one that gives us actually the forecast. The weather one gives us the current weather, and we don't need that, or we don't need only that. Okay, that makes more sense. So we have our name, our country, sunrise number, sunset is a number. What else? And then we have the list. The list is essentially everything that we need for our like scrolling effect, you know, like to show what the weather forecast is going to be like. So the list is going to be an array, but we still need to define which array and what's the array going to be inside and what's the objects are going to be like, because we are going to be using it. So let's go to the first one. They're all the same. I'm going to do DT, which is daytime, I think. Yeah, it's a number. Then we're going to have main, which is an object. And we're going to have all of these. Well, not all of them. Let me just paste what we're going to have. So we're going to be taking feels like, so this one, humidity, pressure, temperature, and temperature max and temperature min. Let's close up main. We also have weather. We're interested in that. We want to get the icon. So let's put weather. We want to have the main, which is string, icon, also a string, and description, also a string. And that's wrong, because the weather is an array of objects. Yeah. Then we have the wind. We are also interested in the wind. It's gonna have speed, string, no, it's all numbers. Number, let's gust and degree. Yeah. Then we have our clouds. Where were they? There. All number. Pop is this precipitation stuff. And visibility. Visibility. I don't like typing the word visibility, it's so annoying. Number as well. All right, I think we have it. I think we should be fine now. However, we still do need to create our little data, because I don't want to get all of the forecast. Like, they give you a forecast for the next 3 days, and I think that's just like a lot to scroll through and unnecessary data. Because once you scroll, I don't know if you have that. If you have an iPhone, you probably have the same, like on the weather app. Probably other weather apps have the same, but like you can scroll a little bit in order to see what's the weather like, let's say tomorrow morning, if today is the evening, or even like tomorrow's evening, in order to kind of like already know by hours a little bit of a more concrete forecast. But if you start scrolling a lot, you lose the understanding which day it's being talked about. So there is no really sense in do that the way how we're planning our UI. And that's why I want to cut to 16 items. So if they give an item every 3 hours, so that's going to be for just like day and a half, right? And I think that's, in my opinion, that's optimal. So let's do const forecast data equals, and it's going to be an object. And don't forget that we already defined the object that it needs to be. We're going to spread data.ct. So whatever we have here, where is the city? Here, whatever we have in the city, we can just spread it. Like, we don't need to do forecast.ct. We can just do forecast.name, forecast.sunrise. Then our list is going to be data.list.slice. And we're going to take everything from the very first item until the 16th item. This is the point where you can change things as you prefer. And that's what we're going to be committing, forecast data, or setting to our state. Now, if we actually, so we are passing our forecast to our app. If we will say forecast.sunrise, it should show us something, shouldn't it? There we go. Nice, very nice. Okay, so let's just create a component called forecast, to which we're going to pass our forecast. Let's go to our components, create a new file, forecast.tsx. And let's create forecast. We don't need to import the React stuff, but we do know that here we're going to expect a forecast and we're going to be returning a jsx.element, and our forecast is of a forecast type. Import forecast type. There we go. Why doesn't it like it? Wait, did I do export? Where's the export forecast type? Oh, maybe it's complaining because I'm not using forecast anymore yet. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So forecast, save it. Yep. Close the sidebar. Forecast type, this has any type. Oh, wait a sec. That's the one. Okay. Is it? Wait a second. No. Maybe let's just call it data because that's a lot of forecast. So data, and here it's data, and here type props are going to be data and then forecast type. Whew, okay, now, oh wait, not whew yet. Now it's props. There you go. So basically, because we're not getting the forecast directly, we had like a forecast in forecast because it's the props and then you pass it as a data and then only what's inside of it. Let me show you in here. That's what we had, but we had data.name, data.country, data.la. So we had to make like a small wrap around it. However, the beauty of it is that you can just define like, okay, my whole data is the forecast type. So remember, the same thing that you can just reuse those things. It's so freaking massive because otherwise you would just need to retype it again and make mistakes because we're all humans. And what's the point of TypeScript? Nobody can save us then. So this way, it's much nicer. And now to the fun part of creating this cutie UI. Okay, so let me save you some, or let me save myself some time. You still need to type that. I pasted again whatever we want to make it look like this frosty thing. It's very similar to what we have on the search component, but it's a little bit different because of the height and the width and all of these kind of things. So if we go now into London, and to this and search, then you see we still have the frosty glass. So now we can start by adding a section. This section, the only class name that it has is text center. And what it's gonna have is an h2, and we're gonna write data.name. There we go, we have our first London. Class name, because remember it resets everything, is going to be text to Excel, font black. However, we also have the country, so I want to add a span with data.country. And the span, I want it to be font thin. Oh, I also want the comma to be thin. I don't want it to be like that. Yeah. Oh, maybe just remove the comma. That's also a good call. Yeah. If you remember, which was just a couple of seconds ago, we get a list of all the forecast, the weather thingy. And the one that is for today is the first item. So what I want to do is to extract the today. So I don't need to do list 0. I can just explicitly say like, okay, that's today. It's gonna be data.list and the first one, if I would type properly, list 0. Yeah. And that brings me to add in an h1 because I want the information about the weather, about the degrees to be of a higher priority than the location of it. And it's going to have a class name, text for Excel, and font extra bold. Yeah, today dot main dot temp. Right. Now we want to round it up, right? Because we I don't know, who cares about 97? Math dot round. Where am I? Math dot round. It's gonna be 12 degrees, right? Because that's what most likely it's gonna look like. And I want to add like a little degree. And since you can see here that we're gonna have a lot of places where we're adding the degree, so we will create a tiny component. You can create it in the same file. Const degree equals, we're going to accept a temperature, which is going to be a number, and we are going to return a JS6 dot element, and it's gonna have a span with the temperature, and then it's gonna have a sub of a 0. But hold on, since it's gonna be a component, it's not just a function, it's a temp, the prop is passed like this, and then it's gonna be temp number. So this is another way how you can define the props. Here we have the data, and then we have column props, which is then the object. But you can also, if you have just one argument, you can just set it straight like, okay, temp, and then a colon. So instead of writing here props, you just write the content of the props, and that's also fine. That's usually okay when you have small components, but if you have like, I don't know, 2 or 3, then it starts getting messy. I don't know, I actually prefer this thing, but yeah, just wanted to show you how it also can be done. So we are going to add the degree in here, and the temp is going to be this value that we already rounded. So temp, like this. Oh, there you go. Cool. Let's see if it looks the same. Why does it have this space? Because this has a space, right? There you go. Now it doesn't have a space. Cool. Now another thing we want to do, or I want to do, is to have some information about today's weather. So for example, we have here the clouds, and that one was from, here we had the weather main and description. So let's do that. Today dot main 0, right? Dot description, because 0 represents that it's the first one. Sorry, that's not main, that's weather. As well as today dot weather dot main. That's what I wanted. There we go. So we have clouds, overcast clouds, and with a space, the prettier is removing it, so we're gonna do an artificial space like that, and we're gonna add the class name that the text is a small text. Next, I wanna add the highest and lowest temperature of the day, and it's gonna be H. I'm gonna use again the degree already. See, super helpful. High and low. So the highest is going to be temp. It's in today temp today main dot temp. And the highest it's temp max. Let's copy that because we're only gonna change the last word and the last 2 characters of it to min. So if we save that, that's gonna be there. However, we still want to have a rounding up of it. So since the highest, I think that the highest should be rounded to the highest point, which means that it's going to be math.ceil, like ceiling, so rounded to the top one. And the lowest should be math.floor. There we go, so 12 and 11. Because before that it was, let me check again what it was. 1197 and 1115. So if we would just like do math random, it would all be 12, and that would just not make sense to do either, right? All right, so we have our little header that's exactly like this one, and now let's get to the fun of doing this list. So let's create another section. In this section we're going to do data.list.map. It's so nice that it gives you everything here. I'm really like, it's cool. It's so cool. Item and I, And we are going to loop over all the lists that we have. And what we want to return is a div, because what else? No. We're going to have a key, very, very simple. It's going to be an I, class name. What is going on? Like this, right? Yeah. There you go. Okay. I was a little bit confused there for a sec. So we're going to add a p tag, and that one is going to have our item.dt. Yep. Then we're going to have an image where the source, let me show you. It's something that I figured out. They have in the docs, they're saying that their images are under this URL. So they give you the icon, and we can actually do item.weather icon because they're sending it to us, and just pass this value to @2.xpng, and that's going to be the icon. There you go. And the alt attribute of the icon is going to be weather icon. Actually going to specify what type of weather of the icon is in it, you know? So like, because sometimes it's rain, sometimes it's cloud, sometimes it's sunny. So let's just describe that. And we had that in weather description, but in our case, it's going to be item.weather description, like so. So now if you hover, or you see there's like name, weather, icon, overcast, clouds. And of course, last but not least, we also want to have a p tag with the degree. And the temperature is going to be math.round item.main.temperature. There we go. Now let's make it beautiful. So this section needs to have a flex because I want it to be like a little thingy there. So if we save it, it's a flex, but it's all kind of like, you know, it's out of control. So we need to do overflow x scroll. There we go. So now we can actually scroll through all of our data, but it's a little bit too much to scroll. I'm gonna limit that a little bit less. Then let's define just some margin top of 4, padding bottom of 2, and margin bottom of 5. Now this div would also need to have some styling and some serious ones. So inline block, text, center. The width would be 50 pixels because I want to actually limit the width of it. And then flex shrink 0. Now this is something that I learned with the flex shrink 0. When I was building this API challenge, I was just using flex and it was shrinking the hell of like the images, and that was really not nice. So one thing that is a little bit weird is our P with our datetime. We need to format it. We also need to kind of like, I like how the first one can tell you that it's now and then the rest are going to be not now. We can check if the index is 0, then just write now, else do the item date. So you see now our first item is now, so the user knows like, okay, now it's 12 if it's not clear, but it just makes more sense, right? And then the user can be like, okay, from now on, this is the weather. And the item DT will be, we need to first do new date, then we need to multiply it by 1,000, and then we need to get the hours. This is something that Stack Overflowed it. It's not me, so there is nothing to talk about here. The class name of the text is going to be text small, and I think also the last one, right? This one is going to be text small and font bold. Yep, looking nice. All right, you see we have some sunshine a little bit here and there. Cool. So we're done with this part. Now let's go and create another section, and that's where we're going to have all of our tiles. So first we're going to show the sunrise and the sunset, and we're going to create 2 tiles for that. So div class name. So what we're doing here, we're setting a width of 140 pixels because we want it to be specific. And since it's like already mobile sized, so there is no issue with responsiveness here. Text is small, font is bold, flex column, because I want everything to be like in one beautiful column aligned central, and then a background to be a little bit transparent, a blurred. Why do I keep on having these mistakes? What is ls? Copy and make both of them. The section will also need to have a class name of flex, justify between text zinc 700. Cool. Now we just need to add the data into it. I don't know if you noticed, but we do have icons already in this repository because I have already took care of that, and we can just add the sunrise icon, and there it's gonna be. And then here we can add the sunset icon. Here it is. And now we just need to add the time. So the time we can add in a span or in a p tag, as you prefer. There is a helper function. Here we are, where we have a lot of functions to help us deal with the data that we're going to be displaying here. So in case of the sun, we're again going to be doing the timestamp thing that we did for our forecast. But with this time, we also want to get the hours and get the minutes. And then if, for example, it's, I don't know, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I want it to have 07 or 05, you know, not just like 7. I want to make it more unified. And that's basically what this function is doing. It's more like a formatter function for the data. So we're going to be using the get sun time. If I just type it, get sun time, it's going to import it by itself. We can check it here, get sun time in the helpers. And if we go back to our sun time, then we can do today dot, didn't we have that? No, we have that in data dot sunrise. Yeah, because I remember that was like one of the top level ones. So then we can just copy that, paste it here, and just paste here sunset. Save it, and there you have it. Let's add some padding top, more margin top too. Sounds good. Yep, nice. Looks similar. Looks pretty similar to me. All right. Cool. Now the next one is going to be those beautiful tiles. And so like the sunset and the sunrise, they are just two tiles. You could also put them in a separate component because they're essentially displaying the same thing. But the next section is especially similar. We don't even need us. We're actually going to be continuing here. So we are going to have our wind, feels like. We're going to have our pop, pressure, visibility, you know what I mean? Wait, we lost humidity. Feels like humidity, okay. Humidity. There we go. And each of them are going to look kind of the same, so I would suggest to create a component. So let's go there. I'm going to call it tile.tsx. And let's create it. Tile. Remove the import. And save it. Each tile, let's define the props. So each tile will have an icon, a title, an info, and a description. This is our icon, this one, the one before that. This is the title, this is the information, and this is just the description. So more like a secondary thing. And we are, of course, returning a JSX.element. Save it. And now let's create our type, props. So the icon, actually the icon is going to be only one of these 6. So we can actually define the strict value of this prop. It can be only one of these. So if it's not wind, feels, humidity, visibility, pressure, or pop, we don't know which icon to render. So we're not going to allow even anything else. It's not like a free form. You really need to know what you're requesting. The title is going to be a string. and same for the info and description. However, you see that sometimes in the feel like we have the degree component we're going to be using. So it's not going to be only a string. It can also be a JS6 element, right? So sometimes it can be just like 4 kilometers per hour, or sometimes it's going to be a JS6 element. And then we define that these are the props. Now let's get our icons. So they're going to be an object, and each of the keys are going to be exactly like these ones. So you can even put fields, humidity, visibility, pressure, and pop. And let's import it. Wind, fields, humidity. I don't have humidity. What do I have? I do have humidity. Yeah. Maybe it got tired of auto-completing. Visibility. Yeah, only humidity is like pressure and pop. There we go. Of course, we need a comma at the end of everything. And save it. Nice. So now once we get the icon, we can actually say that, okay, our icon component, that's why it's with a capital letter, is going to be icons, icon. So if we're passing an icon of a value wind, it's going to do icons.wind, and it's going to give us the wind component, and that's what we're going to render as an icon. So here, if I do icon, and in forecast, if I import tile, and the icon is going to be wind, and if we go here, icon wind, excuse me, I think it's because of these ones. Let's just see if that works. Yeah, that works. You see, so we have like our little wind icon there. Cool. So let's uncomment all of our things, and let's bring all the data that we need. So title is going to be also wind, and let's actually comment it again and work on the tile first. And once we have that, we can just reuse it for everything. So each tile is going to be an article, as it's like a separate item of important information. Class name, I'm gonna copy again because it's a lot. It's very similar to the sunrise thing, but the difference here is that we have a height, and again, my favorite non-existing backdrop blur. Yeah, I think most of it is exactly the same. So if we save that, why do I have a div here? What is going on? There we go. Okay, now we need to make it like wrap. So it needs to have a flex wrap. There we go. Cool. So we have the icon, we have the frosty look. Now we need to add the H4 and to add a title here. And in here, going to add a class name, margin left 1, just to have it a little bit to the side. I know what there was a div, because there is another div here that has a flex center class name like that. Yeah, so we flex the item in the center and we tell them that it's text small and font bold. After that div, we have an H3 with class name of margin top 2 and text large, where we are going to put the information that we have. And then we're going to have a div. I actually think that we should have a p tag here, not a div, with a class name text small, extra small, and font bold. Here we're going to have description. Now, of course, it's erroring because it doesn't know about those things. Yep. All right, and now we're done with the tile and we can kind of forget about it and go to our forecast and extend everything here. So first the info. If we check here, our info is like 4 kilometers per hour. And that one also comes from our helpers. Open a backtick. And then the first one, today.wind.speed. We're gonna round that up. Math.round. And we're gonna say that it's a kilometer per hour. Then we have a description, which has a little bit of more information. So it has the direction of the wind and the gusts of it. Now, if you want to define the direction, you need to go to our helpers. And I've already done this function. So basically, there is this wind direction, right? If it's like north, northeast, east, there's even more details, but I just stopped at this type of level. So depending on the degree, which degree we are getting from the API, it's gonna return us in which direction the wind blows. And that's what we're gonna be using. So we're gonna remove all of that. We are going to get wind direction, but in order to do that, we need to do a math round on today.wind.degree. And after that, we're going to do gusts. So we're basically constructing the whole sentence here. Gusts, and again, open the JavaScript interpolation, today.wind.gusts. Gusts can be like a very, very, very long value. So we're going to cap it with a fixed in order to say that we want to just have like it's just gust, right? Just the first value of it after the dot. And then put kilometers per hour. Well, not here, sorry. Outside of the JavaScript part where the string is. Kilometers per hour, okay. So let's go again to London, search, and there we go. It's a south blowing wind with gusts up to 11.0 kilometers an hour. Nice. Now we only need to do 5 more. But I guess you get the point of it, right? This whole thing, what we're doing and how we're doing it. So let's keep it up. We're almost done. Title is going to be feels like. Icon is feel. Yep. The info is going to be the degree, and the temperature of the degree is going to be today.main.temp, but also rounded, right? Sorry, it's not today.main.temp. It's actually feels like. That's the whole point. And then we have the description, which we're actually going to construct ourselves, and we're going to say if it's colder or warmer. And we are going to check. Let me paste that. We're opening our curly brackets JavaScripty thing. We're going to math round our feels like, and we're going to math round our today.main.temp, and we're going to check if the feels like is smaller than the temp, then we want it to be feels colder. But if not, it means that it's higher, then feels warmer. And that's what we want to do. Oh, I did it in the info. Sorry, I need to... There. Yeah, did it wrong. So if we go now again to London, search, and there we have it. It feels colder. Correct. Well, correct based on numbers, I have no idea. Next in line is humidity. So icon, humidity. Title is humidity, but with a capital H. Info would be in percentage. And then today.main.humidity. And the description is going to be get humidity value. And we're going to pass the today humidity. And let's see what it's actually offering us. Get humidity value is, again, kind of like an artificial. I Googled that. I checked like, okay, what is a comfortable humidity or whatever? And there are actually scales for everything related to weather. Surprise, surprise. So if it's lower than 55, then it's dry and comfortable. If it's betweenish, then it's a bit uncomfortable. And if it's higher than 65, then it's uncomfortable air. Again, everything is like very subjective here, I guess. Or I don't know, maybe, no, weather shouldn't be subjective, right? But maybe ours is. Anyway, we see that we have our wind, we have it feels like, humidity. Now we need our pop. So I'm just gonna copy that down and have a pop. What is that? Precipitation. Interesting word. I've never heard of that yet before. And the info is going to be today main pop. Do we have that? No, we don't have today dot pop. We're going to round that. Math dot round. And we're going to multiply it. And the description is get pop today dot pop clouds. Oops. Do all that. And then curly brackets because that's the JavaScript part. Comma clouds at today dot clouds dot all, and it's a percentage. Yeah, there we go. Precipitation. It's funny because it says that it's gonna rain. This API is not perfect because also, let me show you. If I go to Berlin, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if I click on Berlin, it gives me Alt-Köln. Also, another thing I wanted to add, wait a second before I forget it, in the search, I wanted to add here option dot country. Yeah, let's extend our types with a country. So we can close that. So then in the search, you can have this. So if I go Berlin, I at least know which Berlin is meant. See, it gives me Alt-Köln. I don't know. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we need pressure and visibility. Pressure, and here, I'm just gonna remove the main P. The info is today main pressure, and it's measured in HPA, whatever that is. And then the description, we're going to math round today.main.pressure. That's how it's apparently measured. There is a scale that if it's like lower than 1013, then it's lower pressure, or higher than the standard. There's like a standard at 1013, and depending on that, the scale tips on or off either way. So higher than standard. By the way, this is just because our inspector was open. That's fine. And now the last one is gonna be visibility. There's like a funky thing, so I just Googled that, and then I Googled the API. And the way how it works is that we're taking today's visibility, we're dividing it by 1,000, and we're putting it to fixed, and that's the kilometers we get. And the description would be get visibility by value, visibility value, and we're gonna pass today.visibility. And there you have it. We have our app. It's working. This is our beautiful thing. You see, if it's like bigger, if it's smaller, then it goes like this. And la 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 la. What else should we try? Let's try Paris. There we go. Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend that I know how to pronounce it. And yeah, that looks about right for our European weather. Cool, really nice. So this is our app. The thing that you can extend, so let me show you in the use forecast. We also don't have a dot catch, and that's a little bit, it's kind of crucial, you know? So usually you would do log you would console log an error just to, just to have it so it doesn't crash or whatever. I mean, it could still crash, but yeah, at least account that errors can happen. And this is something that you can extend. Another thing that you can extend would be, for example, to add a loader. So if I add London and I select and I click on search, then even though probably like my internet speed is quite fast, that's why it's like instant. But if like the user is, I don't know, on the phone, or there's like some bad connection or slower internet as well, then it would take a little bit longer and the user would keep like on pressing, and that's not ideal, right? Because then you're firing multiple API calls. So that's a moment for improvement as well. And of course, you can always improve the CSS, the JavaScript, the naming, splitting it into even smaller components. In fact, I would encourage you to split it into smaller components and create TypeScript components, right? The TSX extension, and to play around with the props and to try to define props by yourself and see how it works. And maybe also put them in the index.ts and, play around with the TypeScript props and reusing them, ensuring that you have the same props everywhere, and trying to pass or maybe to use components without the correct props and see where it brings you. Because I think this is how you can really test out things and see how they work. So yeah, I'm super happy with the result. I'm also really, really hoping that this API will not go down and it's gonna be working for a very long time. Let me know in the comments how it worked for you. So we did it, it's done. Tag me if you do it. I'm on Instagram, also on GitHub. All the repositories, all the links are gonna be in the description box below. I guess I'll see you next time, and let me know which other projects you wanna see happening, or that you have like a nudge to call, not a nudge to do, right? I don't know. It has been a while. I've been sitting here for around 4 hours. I think it's time to log off. Thank you for staying up until the end. Let me know how it went. Let me know what I can improve next time. And always looking forward to hearing from you, seeing your project. And don't forget to put it on your web development portfolio. And good luck. Bye.